Hello and welcome back to Visiting Dugout, a Fans First Sports Network production. I am Crystal O'Keefe. Today I have a returning guest, Sara Sanchez, on to chat about the Cubs. Sara, please feel free to reintroduce yourself, I suppose.
Hey, good to be here with everybody. You can find my Cubs writing at SB Nation's BleedCubbyBlue.com. I do some fantasy baseball work over at Baseball HQ and Pitcher List as well. Hanging out with our friends also on the Fans First Sports Network, the Bleacher Bench group with Cup of Cubby Blue and the Sun Ranto Show. I'm kind of all over the place.
Yeah, some of these baseball girlies were a little busy.
True. Literally finished up with the day job and hopped on here, but that's how we roll.
Yeah, yep. That's about how my day usually goes. So we can talk about these Cubs first. What is new on the north side?
I mean, we're aspiring to be a 500 team in the most boring way possible. The team has excellent starting pitching and an adventurous bullpen. The offense is really hit or miss. Some days they put, like today, I think they put up 6 or 7 runs. The offense is firing on all cylinders and things look really good. Other days they will not score a run, maybe not score a run for 2 days. It is a phenomenally mediocre crew that has been assembled by Jed Hoyer.
Yeah, I don't think any of the Chicago teams are doing so hot this year.
No, I mean, I was joking on Twitter the other day that when the White Sox had lost their 21st game in a row, I was like, I don't know, man, maybe I'm more interested in the White Sox at the moment and them chasing actual history as opposed to the Cubs chasing mediocrity. It's been a rough summer for baseball fans in the city of Chicago, not gonna lie.
Yeah, baseball's rough, basketball's rough. Who knows what football's going to bring, but just a terrible time to be a fan in this city. So obviously we're both in last place in our divisions, but the Cubs are a lot closer. I think when I looked last, it was about 9 games back, maybe less now that you won. And not 42 games back like the White Sox. So,
oh my God.
I know. So the Cubs more than likely are not going to make it to postseason either, just because your division is pretty good right now. But what is the plan for next season, do you think? What would you like to see happen?
I would like to see Jed Hoyer get fired. That's my plan for next season. I don't think it's actually going to happen, but I am well over everything Jed Hoyer. The Cubs are kind of interesting because, yes, they are in last place in their division, but they are also only quote unquote 5.5 games out of the wild card. Now, that is because every team in the National League, with the exception of 3, is within at least 5.5 games of the wild card. So it's just kind of the entire National League has this cluster of mediocrity that is kind of wild to behold. So this is not me saying that I think the Cubs are going to make it to the postseason. I think the last time I looked, the Fangraphs odds have vacillated between a 4% chance to make it to the postseason or a 7.2% chance to make it to the postseason. These are not numbers you want to see. No. If you would like to see your favorite baseball team play meaningful baseball in September and October. But it is quasi-competitive on the north side of Chicago. You get the impression that they are a superstar or two, and I use those words deliberately because superstars cost money, and what Jed Hoyer does not like to do is spend money on baseball players. They are probably a superstar or two away from being a legitimately good team. Justin Steele throws like an ace. He quality start after quality start after quality start. Shota Imanaga, who came over from Japan this year, has been a revelation. He is so fun to watch pitch. Did it again just yesterday, 6 innings, 2 runs, absolutely killing it. All the strikeouts in the land. That splitter fastball combo is super nasty. He's great. Jamison Taillon is throwing like a guy that you would be happy to have on your staff in a postseason series. They've got Ben Brown, looked great prior to getting hurt earlier this season. He's a rookie this year. He will be possibly still in his rookie eligible area or just barely in his second year next year. I mean, Cade Horton, who is down in AAA. He's dealing with a lat issue at the moment, but he's another guy who looks like he's got ace potential. Javier Assad and Jordan Wicks have both been very, very good, right? Like it's a team that has the building blocks for really successful starting pitching that is cost controlled and going to be there for a long time. Like that's not anything to laugh at, right? Like that's a thing that you want on your favorite baseball team. On the flip side, they just don't hit the ball with the authority that you want them to in order to consistently score runs. And I'm honestly not entirely sure what's going on with that. I've done some looks at it and I haven't found any compelling explanation. But the big difference between the Cubs last year at this time and the Cubs this year at this time is their ability to score runs consistently. It's nothing else. I mean, I don't know if it's structural. I don't know if it's like Cody Bellinger came a little bit back to earth, and last year he was at like his 80th percentile, and this year he's at like his 50th percentile. What Cody Bellinger do you get next year? I don't know, but the Cubs are going to find out because that deal is structured in such a way that Cody Bellinger is definitely coming back, right? Dansby Swanson went from being kind of an average bat to being a not very good bat, and that seems to be showing some signs that he could come around, but again, he's going to be here for a while, so you hope that you get something approximating Dansby's last year in Atlanta, not what the Cubs are getting from him this year, because that could be kind of yikes. It really has just been the offense not clicking at all at times. And when they are good, the offense is clicking, and when they are not, the offense is not. Bullpen's been up and down, lots of injuries. We found out earlier today that Adbert Alzolay, last year's closer, who I think was one of the two big keys to their success last season, combined with Cody Bellinger, is going to have Tommy John surgery. He is definitely out for the rest of the season. He might be out for all of next season too. It breaks my heart a little bit because that means that I'm the very real risk that the Cubs are going to non-tender my current favorite player on the team after trading my favorite player on the team in Christopher Morel, and not re-signing my other favorite player on the team, Wilson Contreras. And we can talk about my feelings about the Cubs if we want, like they just hate all the people I love, but we really don't need to do that. That's more like a therapy session.
Yeah, no, I have those therapy sessions quite a bit, just via like a group chat, because I feel the same. They get rid of people that I love all the time on the South Side. Speaking of getting rid of people and whatnot, I'm assuming you follow the trade deadline because, you know, you're very involved. So how did you feel about anything that the Cubs did?
I mean, I think that they are going to regret trading Christopher Morel for Isaac Paredes. I wrote about this when the trade happened, and I think it's about as fair of a piece as I could muster for them trading away the guy that I viewed as being a potential superstar who you happen to have under team control, right? Like, say what you will. At the moment, yes, Paredes is a better player than Christopher Morel right now. Christopher Morel has David Ortiz upside in his bat. Isaac Paredes does not. There is no world where Isaac Paredes turns into a superstar. There is a world where Christopher Morel does. And if any team is going to get that out of Christopher Morel, it's probably going to be the Tampa Bay Rays. I really wish Jed Hoyer had hung up the phone when the Rays called asking about Christopher Morel. Paredes is fine. It's kind of funny that the Cubs traded for him after trading him to the Detroit Tigers for 2 months of Alex Avila Jr. and a year and a half of Justin Wilson, who was a very erratic reliever for the Chicago Cubs when he was here. Both Jeimer Candelario and Isaac Paredes famously blocked in the Cubs system and then traded for again. How many guys can we trade away to get back the guys we traded away before? But this is just all, I mean, I don't know. A lot of what the Cubs are doing right now, are they a on paper fine team? Yes, I think their run differential at the moment is +7. They are almost exactly average in terms of where you expect them to be. They will probably finish the season somewhere right around 500, which is what I expected when the season started. It's what most projection systems saw them as, like a 73 to 78 win team. It's uninspired. You are the Chicago Cubs. You are one of the 5 premier franchises in baseball. You print money at Wrigley Field. There is no, Jed Hoyer is going to make some motions this offseason about like, oh, we're in conversations with Juan Soto. You are not, because Juan Soto is not coming here until you show that you spend money on a product that wins baseball games. And the Cubs had this moment where they could have capitalized on that in the 2016-2017 era And what they needed to do was go out and sign Bryce Harper like a big market team did, which is what the Phillies did. And we are looking at a radically different Cubs the last few years, everything. But they didn't do that. And now I have to watch the Phillies with all the guys that I wanted to be Cubs, Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, doing the thing, best team in baseball, while Jed Hoyer rearranges deck chairs. Is that really the Titanic? Like, they're not a disaster, but he's like rearranging deck chairs on some mediocre ship.
Sounds like it. Yeah, I too remember the Bryce Harper talk for the White Sox and how they were supposed to get him and they were in discussions and his name was in the United Center and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, well, that didn't happen. You got nothing that year. so frustrating. Also, and it's funny that you mentioned that 2016, 2017 era, because I was looking at, who's kind of up, their contracts are up, who might not be coming back. And there are quite a few, but the main person I wanted to mention was Kyle Hendricks. So, and I looked, Willow has a lot of opinions on Kyle Hendricks, apparently.
I do too, Willow.
Yeah, he's 34. He's been with the Cubs for 10 seasons now. So, I mean, how are Cubs fans feeling about that? Because is he like the last? Okay, Willow, that's enough. Is he the last? Oh, goodness, Willow, stop. Is he the last one from that World Series team? And how are you guys feeling about not having him anymore?
He is the last player from the Cubs World Series core. He's the only one left. So I have recently this year been referring to Kyle Hendricks as Schrodinger's pitcher. So for those of you who are familiar with Schrodinger's cat, there's a cat in a box. And at any given moment, depending on whether the cat has released this poisonous gas, the cat can be both alive and dead, right? And so Kyle Hendricks at any given point in a season when he comes in to start a baseball game might pitch a no-hitter and he might give up 8 runs. It is truly a thing to behold. And I'm not joking. I've watched him take no-hitters this season into the 6th inning. And then other times I've just watched him get lit up. He's a really fascinating pitcher for this era. He doesn't blow guys away with speed. I mean, I am old enough to remember when Dan Herron was on the Cubs, and Dan Herron's Twitter is famously, I throw 88. Kyle Hendricks went to Driveline to see if he could get his fastball back up to 88. This is the slowest pitcher known to man, but he's a very good location guy, and he's kind of tricky. He's been leaning more on his curveball this season, which is the pitch that got him scouted originally. He hasn't really thrown it a ton as a pro, but he's been doing it this season, and he's been doing it with some effectiveness. If I were managing Kyle Hendricks right now, I would let him go 2 times through the order and pray. His 3rd time through the order numbers are awful. I also go to every Kyle Hendricks home start that I possibly can, just because I'm not sure if it's going to be the last one. And I love Kyle Hendricks. He's great.
Yeah, he's a good guy, and I got lucky somehow. I think it was either last season or it was 2 seasons ago. I can't quite remember, but he was playing down in Indy, rehabbing with the Iowa Cubs, and Vinny Velasquez was rehabbing from the Pirates system. So I was like, I'm gonna pay $10. I'm gonna sit in the lawn and I'm gonna watch Kyle Hendricks and Vinny Velasquez actually pitch a game, because this is, it's rare that you get 2 major league pitchers on the same night for an amazing deal. Because like I said, I just got lawn seats and took my daughter, and I was like, just bear with me, okay?
Oh, I love that.
So yeah, he's a good guy. I've always been fascinated by him, and he was such a great pitcher, especially during that World Series run and beyond. So, I mean, even for me, it'll be kind of sad that he's not there anymore.
It's going to be a really sad day when Kyle Hendricks is not a Cub anymore. I'm also sorry to go back to my rants about Jed Hoyer, who truly, I have a very nice bottle of champagne that I'm saving for the day Jed Hoyer gets fired. So hopefully sooner rather than later on that one. Kyle Hendricks is doing a thing that shouldn't work but does. he's zigging while everybody else is zagging. And frankly, most of the Cubs rotation is built on a similar, not the same trick, obviously. Not everybody's a changeup specialist. Not everybody throws 88, but all of their pitchers have some tunneling going on, some location specialization going on that is distinct from what most other pitchers who are succeeding at a big league level right now are doing. It's why Javier Assad confounds people. Like there was just an article up at Fangraphs maybe a week or two ago that was like, how long can Javier Assad keep this up? And it's like, well, it's been 3 years. So at this point, maybe he's just good. Like maybe he is just a guy who does something different than everybody else and it works, right? Justin Steele was kind of the same thing. People are like, I'm a 2-pitch pitcher. That can't work. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of working. I've been watching it work. So I think the Cubs have a pitching philosophy that is different than some other franchises, and it's really worked well for starting pitching. And I love that for them. And I wish they could figure out something similar for their bullpen and also how to hit.
Yeah, I understand that sentiment all too well. It's just a hot mess. The White Sox could have won today's game against the A's, but they took Davis Martin out, who was doing great, and replaced him with not so great pitchers, and they lost. So fun. Okay, we'll take a very quick break and come back and actually talk about the series.
Let's do it.
All right. Make notes of this break. Okay, we are back. So let's get into this ultra fun series with the Cubs. Obviously, I like to look up probable pitching first, and it's finally up there. We've got, you will see Garrett Crochet, and you unfortunately will also see Chris Flexen. But it's Jameson and Garrett and Justin and Chris. So how are you feeling about those matchups? How are you feeling about facing Garrett Crochet, really? Because he's good.
Yeah, I'm super fascinated by Garrett Crochet. I'm honestly kind of stunned he's still a White Sox. One of the things that I thought was super interesting with him was the demands he put on his trade conditions, which I don't think I've ever seen a player do. And frankly, I kind of loved it. I'm curious. I wanted to hear from you. What did you think about Garrett Crochet at the trade deadline?
I mean, I think it ruined any chance that he had because people are like, are you serious? But at the same time, it's like that Arrested Development meme that you always see. It's like, good for her, you know? And I was like, good for him for putting that out there. Maybe someone will give him the big bucks. I doubt it. But, he wants to never go back to the bullpen because he's doing phenomenal. Like I had no idea what it was going to be like when we went into this season. It was like hasn't pitched for a while. He hasn't been a starter since like high school. So I was a little concerned, but I'm just thankful that he's still here and that no one decided to go with his demands. I don't think the White Sox are going to go with his demands either, but it's nice to have him right now.
He's great. I'm excited to watch him pitch. He's a super fun person to cheer for. I admit that as a person who's like really involved in fantasy baseball, I kind of thought there's no way that what the White Sox are trying to do with Garrett Crochet is going to work, and it screams injury potential to me to have him just go immediately to a starter's load and just like knock yourself out, Garrett. But it seems to be working, and more power to him. He's a really fun pitcher to watch. I think that you're getting Jameson Taillon and Justin Steele, both of whom are solid number 2s on any team in baseball. Right. They're quality start machines. They get it done without a ton of swing and miss stuff. They generate weak contact like it's their job. Sometimes that blows up on them. If the weak contact finds some BABIP luck, most of the time it does not. So I think that both of those starts should go well for the Cubs. I will say that didn't the Cubs face Chris Flexen earlier this year? I
think so, yeah.
I feel like that went really well for the Cubs.
It did, yeah. Any team that plays Chris Flexen, it goes really well for the other team. He is very frustrating, and he's like considered our number 2 right now just because he's got more experience, I guess, than the others, because it's it's those two and then a ton of rookies. But I watched Davis Martin pitch last night. I watched today. I watched Jonathan Cannon pitch the night before, and like they are phenomenal. I'm really excited for what those two are going to bring. And then Drew Thorpe, currently injured, also great though. So in reality, Chris Flexen would be maybe a 4 or a 5 because he's that frustrating. But to the inexperience of others, we make him our number 2, and that's usually a guaranteed loss for us.
Apparently, actually, his start against the Cubs earlier this season, while the Cubs did win this is the game they won 7-6. He does not appear to have been responsible for most of that because his personal ERA for that game was like 1.8, so it was probably a no decision for him. The White Sox were up 5-0 in the fourth, and then the Cubs came back. But the reason I remember Chris Flexen, and it's all coming back to me now, is in 2023 last season, he started a game for the Mariners that the Mariners were up like 7-0, and the Cubs came back. Nelson Velasquez grand slam. Nelson Velasquez's debut week. David Ross promptly put him on the bench after that because, why would you want a guy hitting grand slams for you and coming back from 7 runs? But yeah, the Cubs have had some Chris Flexen success in the past. I don't know if they'll have it on the South side. The Crosstown Classic's always weird. I feel like when the Cubs play the White Sox or when the Cubs play the Cardinals, it really doesn't matter who has the better record on paper. Like one team could be the worst team in baseball, one team could be the best team in baseball, and the worst team in baseball could sweep the best team in baseball. It's just got the games have a different energy and vibe to them.
Yeah, and it's funny because they're not really rivals. You guys obviously have more beef with the Cardinals and the Brewers. We hate the Astros always, but yeah, you're right. It does have just a strange vibe. I think it's just, I don't even know, honestly. It's just kind of funny. The last Crosstown game I went to, the White Sox lost. And so it was just really weird hearing everyone just walking down the ramps, like singing Go Cubs Go in unison. And I was like, this doesn't feel right, but I'm just going to let it slide. But yeah, it is. It's kind of a fun competitive energy because despite them not always playing each other and not really caring what others think, it's just fun to kind of watch fans interact. So they could be like, oh, yeah, well, my team's better. We have the better Chicago baseball team. And obviously this year you guys definitely do. But yeah, I think the Crosstown series are fun. I just stay away from the bleachers. That's usually where the drama goes down.
I honestly, I went to a game last year, not the Christopher Morel walk-off game. I went to the other game. That was a mistake on my part. And then I got to hear the walk-off from my couch, which was very fun. Every now and again, something big enough happens at Wrigley that you can hear it blocks away in the neighborhood. And it's one of my truly favorite things about living in this neighborhood. And I don't know. I don't love the Crosstown Classic games in person. I think that it's a thing that if you're a Chicagoan who loves baseball, you should go at least once so that you can say you did the thing. But I find that the crowd is like half actual baseball fans who are cheering for the White Sox and Cubs, and half people who just are like all Chicago who think this is a place they're supposed to be. And all of the fights are the Chicago people, not the baseball fans. It's like every time I was actually the last game I was at in the 7th inning, things had been relatively calm and whatever. The White Sox were winning, and somebody behind me was like, God, there haven't even been any fights. And I was like, it's a baseball game.
This is not hockey.
We do not come here for fights.
Yeah,
but I think some people do in this city, and I'm out on the fights.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right though. It is the like non-baseball fans. It's just the people that are coming to the game because they think they should be there. They've had one too many drinks, there's a cup snake involved, and then they start fighting each other. So that's why I steer clear of the bleachers. I like to enjoy my time, actually pay attention to the game when I'm there, and stay away from. I'm too old to be in that mess of people.
And it's a pricey ticket.
It is. It is.
I don't want to spend I can go to 4 games for the cost of one Crosstown Classic game, and I'm like, I would much rather go to the cheaper games where I don't have to worry about fights and or beer spilling on me at all points in time. Like I'm good watching the Crosstown Classic from my couch.
I learned my lesson once with with my ex, we went to Cubs Cardinals game. This was forever ago because we've been divorced forever now. But I just remember Albert Pujols was hitting just bombs after bombs after bombs, and my ex was a big Cubs fan, and I was 7.5 months pregnant with my now teenager in May, and he didn't know any better because he was not actually familiar with Wrigley as much as I am for some reason. And he got seats in the bleachers. And I was like, I have no back support. I have this massive belly.
Oh,
this other team are just, they're launching home runs at this direction constantly. I have a sunburn. And
yeah,
then
that
all
sounds
these
like
drunk people in the bleachers, they were like, if the Cubs win today, will you name your son Clark? What if you go into labor? Will you name him something Cubs related? And I was like, no, I will not. No, leave me alone. But
yeah, the bleacher. So that's wild. Your ex definitely should have thought that one through better.
yeah.
I mean, this explains a lot about why he might be your ex,
Yep.
I think. You're reminding me of times I've been in the bleachers where I was just like, why did I do this to myself? Why did I pay extra to sit in a worse seat to do this to myself? I do like being in the sun. I like being in the sun at Wrigley, as long as it's not like, 900 degrees, or like, I like being in the sun at Wrigley. It's a great thing. But I was once in the bleachers. I was out there with Andy Cruz Vanasek, who is my old podcast partner from the original Cup of Cubby Blue Days. And I'm just keeping score, doing my thing. And this guy was like, I don't know, very impressed that girls keep score or something, and kept trying to hit on me. But he's got a wedding ring on. He's like, I'm going to marry you someday. I'm like, you are married. He's like, where are you going after the game? I'm like, somewhere where you're not. Like, this is not how this is going to go.
Single person that isn't impressed that I can do basic things.
Andy was dying. She's just like, this is great. I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah, I have unfortunately experienced that quite a bit. And there was a date that I went on with some guy, and we were in like a sports bar, and there was, I don't even know what team it was, but it was like there was baseball on, and I'm just like not listening at all to him. I'm looking over constantly, and he was like, what are you doing? What are you watching? And I was like, oh, it's just this game is on. I'm just, sorry, I should pay more attention to you. And we didn't go on a second date. I don't think I was the girl for him because I had no interest in him, and he apparently had no interest in baseball. So it would have never worked out.
Yeah, it's like there's got to be an equal-ish level of sports interests for this to work.
But it's weird because guys are either super intimidated by us, or they try to hit on us because we know basic things, and probably more than they do most of the time.
Yeah, totally. 10-10.
So stay out of the bleachers, girlies.
Unless you want to be hit on by married men. Yeah.
That's your thing.
Returning to the series at hand, handful of guys who are kind of hot for the Cubs right now. These are some stats that go back to the All-Star break, basically. Seiya Suzuki is doing his I look like an MVP impersonation. He's got a WRC plus of 162 and 73 plate appearances since then, so keep an eye on him. Cody Bellinger's just off the injured list, and despite the fact that he's playing with a broken finger, his WRC plus of 127 since the All-Star break and about 33 plate appearances, so he just came off the injured list a week ago. And then Dansby Swanson, who I was giving some grief earlier, has been hitting the ball with some authority recently. He's got WRC plus of 124 since the All-Star break, and nobody else who has at least 30 plate appearances for the Cubs has a WRC plus above 90. So everybody else has been bad.
That's fair. That was actually my question of who was the biggest threat. But with the next one, what are the keys for the Cubs to actually win this series? What are they going to do to hoist their trophy this time?
They need to score runs. I mean, that's the bottom line. I think that, I was watching the game while I was working today. I kind of had it on in the background, and when they get the bases loaded, they need to generate some runs. I really don't care how, like get some timely hits, take a walk, score on wild pitches, whatever. They really should have won. They should have swept the Cardinals the other day and did not because of an inning that was truly just a comedy of errors. Like Isaac Paredes threw a ball well over the first baseman's head. Pete Crow Armstrong waved off Nico Horner and then did not catch a routine fly ball to center. And I'm like, what are we doing right now? And that was how the Cardinals won that game. And I was just like, this is a disaster.
Like a mess.
So, what?
Is he a mess? Because he seems like it.
PCA?
Yeah.
PCA is very toolsy, super fun to watch. He's wicked fast. I mean, the craziest thing I can tell anybody about PCA, bear with me for a second because I'm going to give you some Wrigley Field stats, but they're important for this. So Wrigley Field is a pitcher's park by 3-year park factors on StatCast for everything except triples. But the triples that you generally see at Wrigley Field go into the well in right field. So if you've ever looked at Wrigley Field from above, there's right field and left field both have these little cutouts in them. And when the ball goes into the well down the line, that's when you usually get a triple down the line at right at Wrigley Field. Pete Crow Armstrong hits balls to the left center gap and makes it to third, which is crazy and should not happen. And I've seen him do it twice now. And every time I see this, I'm like, that is not supposed to be a triple. Like, this is bananas. The speed is real. The defense is absurd. He's the best defensive center fielder I've seen on the Chicago Cubs since they had Reed Johnson on the team, honestly. And I mean, that's a throwback for some people. Like, and Reed Johnson didn't have the hit tool that PCA potentially does. So, he could be a very good player for them for a long time. And also, he occasionally gets comps to Javi Baez because of how electric he is, but he is not Javi Baez, because the thing that differentiated Javi Baez from everybody, whether you loved him or hated him, and I know a lot of White Sox fans did not love Javi, still don't. I watch them boo him when he comes in from Detroit. Javi has unbelievable baseball IQ. He can suss out a situation from the second the ball hits the bat and know how to get 2 outs instead of 1, or how he can get an extra base. And he just does weird things that, like, you're like, that shouldn't work, but it does. And it does because Javi understands the game at an intuitive level that, frankly, sometimes gets him in trouble because he decides to do a thing that his other fielders haven't figured out yet, and nobody's in position to do the thing that Javi decided would work. Pete Crow Armstrong doesn't have that type of baseball IQ, but he does have that type of baseball skill set. And so he routinely does things like call somebody off and then miss the ball. And you're like, what are we doing here? Or he'll, he'll put a bunt down when he wasn't asked to bunt, when there's like 2 men in scoring position and nobody out. And you're like, no, this is not where you bunt for a hit, where you hit a fly ball. So I think he'll get better as he gets more experience. But I also think that the tools are so loud that sometimes he's trying a little bit too hard. The guy he actually reminds me of is the guy the Cubs just traded away, Christopher Morel, who also, the tools are so loud that when he uses them and they don't work exactly, like when he throws a ball 96 miles per hour to first and it, misses the first baseman entirely, you see it more. And it's like, loud tools, good baseball IQ. Could be a star someday if he can figure out that baseball IQ part. But he's fun to watch. And watch the speed, man. He can fly.
Yeah, that is one thing I have noticed about him anytime I've seen the Cubs play. Do you have any actual fears heading into the series? Because I know you mentioned score some runs. I don't think you want to be embarrassed by a team that, lost 21 straight.
I don't know. It might get Jed Hoyer fired faster. Which
true. That
is my goal right now.
I say that every day about Pedro Grifol, but he still has a job. So
not fears, really. I can be really honest for a second, and I'm curious how White Sox fans are dealing with this season, because you're having a season where the team is potentially historically bad, but you sort of knew the team was going to be bad going in. So the fact that they're historically bad is I don't know, it sucks. It's not fun to watch. I remember all those years where the Cubs were losing 100 games. It was not fun. But I knew they were supposed to be bad, so it was whatever. The problem with this Cubs team is we were sold that this team was good. They missed the playoffs by 1 game last year, and they had 2 stretches where they were just tremendously bad, 400 win percentage bad, combined with stretches where they were like a 660 win percentage. And so we were sold that they were bringing this team back together. And we were going to get more of that 660 stuff. And plus, they brought Craig Counsell in instead of David Ross. So, like, you get that extra 2 or 3 wins, and now you're in the playoffs, and who knows what can happen if you go on one of those hot streaks when you're in the playoffs. And the Cubs are just a 500 team. Like, that's kind of who they are. I have had a hard time getting fired up about anything with this team, especially since they traded Christopher Morel. Like, I find that move infuriating. I think that's the type of move that a GM or a president of baseball operations makes. And in 5 years, it's the reason people look at them with derision. It's like, and I brought up David Ortiz earlier, but like, it's like DFAing David Ortiz, non-tendering David Ortiz. It's like non-tendering Kyle Schwarber. It's like I joke about the Cardinals being terrible arbiters of their outfield talent because they non-tendered /DFA'd /traded Randy Arozarena, Adolis Garcia, Zach Gallen. It's just like, what are we doing? Juan Yepes, who's like having a coming out party with the Nationals. It's just like the Cardinals could build a World Series contender with the dudes they let go because they couldn't figure out how to make them good for them. And the Cubs have made some moves in the last 3 years that I think are on that level. Like, Kyle Schwarber goes everywhere he goes and wins. Do you think that's an accident? It's not. Like, Theo Epstein had this whole system where he would have like character dossiers on the guys that he was going to draft. And that's why they took Kyle Schwarber so much higher than people thought they should take him. And they just let him go for nothing. They just were like, oh, well, I guess the pandemic really, biblical losses, something schmur. He might cost $10 million in arbitration. So we're going to go sign Jock Peterson for $8 million instead. And I'm just like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever watched my team do. And I feel like they just did it again with Christopher Morel, and the Rays are going to turn him into some 35-plus home run hitting sensation who may not be a great defender, but he's probably going to find a home at second base or left field, which are the positions he should have had in Chicago anyway that were blocked by Nico Horner and Ian Happ, who Christopher Morel is probably a long-term better player than. And when you trade a guy like that for nothing in his pre-arb years, I'm sorry, not nothing. Isaac Paredes is a good player. He's a literal all-star from this year because the Rays only got one and Isaac was the one. But like a guy with a poolside power trick that doesn't work as well at Wrigley Field versus a guy who has 35, 40 home run upside, and a guy who throws 100 and Hunter Biggie. Like, Hunter Biggie is going to be a back of the bullpen stud for the Rays, and I'm just going to have to watch it while the Cubs are giving away games because they don't have anyone who throws 100 miles per hour in the back end of their bullpen. Anyway, my point being, I don't care much about this team other than counting the days until somebody else is in charge. And just while I'm here, Kim Ng could use a job, got treated terribly by the Marlins, and I would like to see what would happen if Kim Ng ran the Cubs.
Yeah, I would like to see what happened anywhere aside from the Marlins because, man, screw them. They made the dumbest mistake. I hope she hexed them. I hope that's why they're so bad this year.
Me too.
But yeah, I mean, she had a job with the White Sox forever ago too. So if she wants to make her way back to Chicago,
we would welcome you with open arms, Kim.
And if you're
either side of town. So yeah, I'm not fired up about the series. I truly don't care. If the Cubs get swept by the White Sox and don't score any runs, I'll be like, yeah, that's what they do. They don't score any runs. If the Cubs sweep the White Sox and win the Crosstown Cup, cool, fine, great.
Sadly, that's kind of how I feel. Same sentiment because they also just got rid of a bunch of likable players. I mean, I loved Eric Fetty. He was amazing. Got rid of him. As soon as they got rid of Michael Kopech, he decided to just go crazy on the Dodgers and be amazing. And that's always the case, especially with our pitchers. The second they trade them away, they have the best seasons of their career.
Well, and in the case of that trade in particular, I don't know what the White Sox were doing, but the return that they got for Fetty and Kopech is just, I'm like, Does Chris Getz know you don't have to say yes to the first offer? Because, like, he could have gotten a lot more for both of those pitchers. I think he seems in over his head to me. Like, I've never seen a team have, like, a sell-off deadline and get so little. And And I am a Cubs fan. So I watched the Cubs under the Tribune Company like just botch trade deadline after trade deadline after trade deadline. I just don't understand what if I was a White Sox fan, I would be livid. But I feel like all of us are just kind of beat down at this point in time. We're like, well, baseball is nice in the sun. Our team might not lose today.
Yeah, if the White Sox don't get shut out, I'm like, oh, that's good. That's where I'm at. And I've just been I think I wrote about it at some point this season about how I just don't even know what to say anymore. Like, I'm so uninspired by this team that it becomes harder and harder to cover them.
It does. I agree.
Because you can only say they suck so many times, like in a clever way. Like, I'm running out of words to describe them.
One of my favorite pieces that I wrote this year was actually so about, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago. And I generally go to a lot of games at Wrigley Field. I actually haven't gone since the trade deadline, not because I'm like boycotting them or anything, just because I had a work trip and day job and, I just have not been back yet. But they started playing Comfortably Numb after the Cubs would lose, because they would just lose in these, like, it's a perfect song to play, honestly, after a Cubs loss. But then I had heard that twice. And then on a Tuesday after they lost to the Phillies, they played Tuesday's Gone. And I was like, oh, that's really good. The organist, right? And I'm like, what other songs could the organist consider as the Cubs lose games this year? I started a list of like, these are all depressing songs that would adequately reflect the way we all feel about Chicago Cubs baseball.
The White Sox don't do that, but I did find it funny that the A's did try to troll the White Sox and play 22 by Taylor Swift, and then they actually did. They won. They broke their streak that night, so they didn't get to 22, which is funny because the White Sox can't even do good at being bad. Like, I was ready for them to just break that record.
Me too.
Let's just do it, because this is exactly how this season is going anyway. Let's make it 25. Let's make it 26. Like, let's just really make it harder for other teams to ever do this again.
And then they won.
I was so disappointed.
I was kind of disappointed too. I was like, I'm going to start tuning into White Sox games to watch them lose.
Right? I think that's why I was watching them, because I've been so bitter about this team that I wasn't watching them for a bit unless I had coverage. And all this week, I was like, I'm going to actually watch them play. I just want to see it happen. I just want to see where they break down and what Pedro does. And if they're going to leave him on the, leave him, not even let him on the plane in Oakland, or revoke his key card, at guaranteed rate. I'm just waiting for this to happen. And now that they've won a game, he's probably going to just get extended.
Yeah, one of these days, the Cubs and White Sox will both be good at the same time, and it won't be a pandemic season where none of us can attend the games.
Well, that's what I've got for you. Please feel free to plug yourself, plug things you're working on, and where we can find you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always happy to talk crosstown stuff with friends from Fans First Sports Network. You can find me on all the socials at BCB_Sara, except Blue Sky, where they don't allow underscores. So I am at BCB Sara there. There's no H on the Sara. If you're looking for my Cubs writing, it's at bleedcubbyblue.com. If you are a fantasy baseball player who is interested in my fantasy baseball takes, they are at Baseball HQ. And I host a podcast called Fantasy Feud on the Pitcher List Network.
Yes, all good things. I also worked for Pitcher List for a couple years. All right. Well, thank you again. Obviously, best of luck, even though I feel like we're both just completely checked out, but best of luck.
I feel like we've both been beaten down by the 2024 baseball season.
Yeah.
I already have my, okay, at least the Red Sox might make it to the playoffs. And if the Red Sox aren't there, the Phillies are definitely going to be there. And I love the Phillies.
Yeah, I'm kind of rooting for the Phillies at this point. I think they're such a good team. They're so fun to watch.
And they spent money.
And they spent money. Like, they are smart.
You can spend money on players, and then they play for you, and they make you better.
If the Phillies win the World Series, I'll be really excited.
Crazy idea. Maybe Jed Hoyer should take notes.
Maybe. All right. Well, thank you again. It's been wonderful, and see ya.